and pop it up on you as usual. So, without further ado, let's get started, shall we? Here we go. So, welcome as ever to tonight's speech and language webinar. Tonight we are looking at natural language acquisition stages 4 to 6. So we've deep dived into stage 1, 2, and 3, and tonight we're going to finish the journey by looking at stages 4 to 6. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Becky Frewin. I have been a speech and language therapist for over 20 years. I have my own private practice and I am also a consultant speech and language therapist at the Cambridge ADHD and Autism Centre. In terms of Zoom housekeeping rules, cameras on or off, I don't mind. It's obviously a hot evening and we may just be a little bit too hot to want our cameras on. But please do keep yourselves on mute at all times. At the end, I will throw open the virtual floor for any questions that you may have. If you have questions as we go and you're anything like me and you know you probably won't hold on to them until the end, pop them into the chat box and I can review at the end. Please do come and go as you need. I've got children at home, pets at home, so I may have interruptions, but if you do too, that's absolutely fine. Slides will be emailed to you when you have completed the feedback form, so you don't have to make too many notes. As you know by now, these fully funded webinars are hosted by the Reach Out Stronger Practice Hub team, comprising of Damon, Victoria, Jess, and Lisa. Damon is online with me tonight. Stronger Practice Hub started out as part of the DFE's COVID-19 recovery catch-up programme, and they've actually grown and evolved into something much bigger and more permanent. So by May, we had doubled the amount of Stronger Practice Hubs from 18 to 36. And our role really is to support early year settings, whatever you may look like, to improve outcomes for children across the EYFS. And our lovely hub is based at the Barn Nursery School in Greenstead Green. One thing that you can all access all the time is the Early Years Evidence Store, which is an online resource where you can check out the current evidence for all domains of the EYFS. So obviously the ones that interest me most are communication and language, and you can see from the kind of landing page for that you've got lots of lovely things if you click through, like vocabulary work, teaching and modelling language, thinking about reading, and there's some handy 2 or 3 minute videos on there so you can have a little brief bursts of information, or you've got longer articles on sort of projects and research that are going on in those fields. And the other one that obviously floats my boat as a speech and language therapist is thinking about personal, social, and emotional development. So again, thinking about feelings in terms of awareness of them, managing them, and also thinking about social communication. So do go and check that out. You can use these QR codes to sign up for our newsletter, which doesn't come often. It's not going to spam you, but it does tell you everything that's going on with the hub. And we've got lots of lovely stuff. It's not just speech and language webinars. We have webinars about things like Ofsted frameworks, loose parts play, maths, the neurology of play, reading, all sorts of stuff, as well as kind of meetups. So managers meetups, childminder meetups, baby room meetups. So there's all sorts of things going on to support you, and it's all fully funded. You can also follow us on Instagram, where there's lots of useful things too. If you look at our offer and you think, yeah, that's all lovely, but I really need help with this particular thing, please do get in touch with the hub, because they can put together some bespoke support based on exactly what you need. So please don't be shy. Please do get in touch with them. Right, Gestalt language processing. Hopefully you have been with me for the overview that we did all the way back in October, and then the last 3 months deep dives into stage 1, 2, and 3. If you haven't, This may not make too much sense, but I'm hoping that you've all been to those webinars before. If not, they're all up on YouTube. Please go and have a look because this really does build month on month. So tonight we're going to have a little look at how this journey kind of comes to its conclusion, I suppose. A lot of what I do comes from this lovely book here, Gestalt Language Processing, which is written by Ali Batty, who is a British speech and language therapist. And this book is so easy to read and accessible. It's got lots of really easy to grasp theory, actually, and really useful practical ideas on how to support children. It's not just the theory, it's the kind of, so what do we do with this? So I think if you're going to buy any book, make it this one. It's about £35, and actually it's fantastic. So it's not just written for speech therapists either, it's for, anybody working with children who are learning language in this style. For the last time, I just want to highlight this amazing quotation. We are not hard to reach. You're just not listening in our key. So for many, many years, we have looked at echolalic children and gone, what are they talking about? There's no content there. And now, obviously, we are changing that dramatically and quickly and going, hang on a minute, they are telling us something, we're just not listening correctly. So do please go and have a little look at this paper, The Script is Not the Silence, by Dr. Jamie Horrocks. It's fantastic. He is a Gestalt language processor himself, and it's one of the best things I've ever read. So if we just review very quickly, stage one of natural language acquisition is our whole Gestalt. So these are the children who are virtually like exclusively echolalic. So you will be having whole scripts from Hey Duggee or Paw Patrol or SpongeBob, whole chunks of songs, whole phrases, whole sentences, and they are often linked to emotional experiences. Stage two, a child starts to mitigate these scripts, so they kind of mix and match and sort of take a chunk of one and a chunk of another and bolt them together. Stage three, as you remember from last time, is where things get interesting because children are starting to use single words referentially. They are starting to realise that the word pen relates to this thing and that actually units of words have meaning in their own right and can refer to things. Tonight, we're going to look at stage 4, 5, and 6. We're going to finish the journey tonight. So you may wonder why I've summarized stages 4 to 6. Why have I done a deep dive into stage 1, a deep dive into 2, and a deep dive into 3, but I've lumped together 4 to 6? Is it because I just got bored? No, there's some strong reasons. But strap yourself in. The next slide gets wordy and then it gets better from here. Okay. So this is where things do have the potential to get tricky in terms of your evidence base, and I think it's important to acknowledge this. As it stands, we don't have empirical data on what percentage of children reach which stage of natural language acquisition at which age. So if I ask Google to have a look and say, what percentage of 4-year-olds reach stage 4 of natural language acquisition? We don't know yet, okay? So I can't actually tell you how likely it is that you as early years professionals will meet a Gestalt language processor at stage 4 to 6. However, it feels reasonable to me to infer that you are all more likely to see stages 1 to 3 simply because the children that you look after are little. So they're going to be at the beginning of their journey. Okay, so that feels reasonable to me, even without cast iron evidence. It makes sense to think that your children are going to be nearer the beginning of the journey than the end. But it's really useful for you to know where the Gestalt language processors are heading. So it's important to know the whole journey, whether or not you're going to necessarily see all of that journey. So currently, as professionals, we're using natural language acquisition as a roadmap for how these children acquire language. So this seems to stand based on clinical experience. So it certainly does with me. All the children who I've identified as Gestalt language processors and I have used the natural language acquisition approach have made progress. But there's no real ages and stages stats yet, like there is with your traditional language learners. And I also think it's important to know for balance and transparency that there's currently a really big debate going on in the world of speech therapy about the fact that we're really leaning into natural language acquisition without that backing of significant empirical evidence. So there are some clinicians who are going, whoa, 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 everything we do needs to be backed by evidence. We haven't got it, but we're running with this. But we counter that with many of us working in this field feel that what we're seeing and experiencing in our clinics really is too significant to ignore. So taking this sort of new approach with these children is giving us such good results that I would feel that stopping that until I had the evidence would be doing any interim children a real disservice. But I just wanted to bring that up. So we feel sure as clinicians that the evidence is going to come and we feel confident to continue using that roadmap. But I thought it's really important to be like transparent about that. So basically, in a nutshell, you're probably only going to see stage 1 to 3. If you think you've got a child who's heading into stage 4 to 6, there's probably going to be a speech and language therapist on board. I would hope there is. This webinar really is for you to kind of complete the journey to see sort of when and how it's going to end. It gets no wordier than that, everybody. All right. So you may remember from last time that stage 3 felt really confusing for communication partners because the child went from using really, 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 really long strings to single words or 2-word combos. Stage 4 sounds wobbly too, but in a really different way. So in stage 3, like I said, that number of words drastically reduces. In stage 4, the number of words goes up again, but what's sounding wobbly this time is the grammar. Okay, and that can give a really odd sound to a child's language. But don't panic. Wobbly grammar is actually a really good sign because it shows that the child is starting to realise that there's some rules going on here and I've got to try and put the right rule in the right place. So don't worry about it. So what we're seeing at stage 4 is children moving away from their memorized language and starting to create their own phrases and sentences. So they're kind of mixing words and phrases together and they're not relying on those whole scripts anymore. So instead of hearing, it's time to go in that really stereotypical way, you might hear, Daddy, go work. So children are now starting really to understand the notion of word order. So words not only mean something and not only can they go together, but they have to go together in a certain order because if you change that order, it means something different. They're thinking about who is doing what and how that feeds in. So the dog is chasing the cat means something different to the cat is chasing the dog. So they're starting to work out who the subject and the object are in a sentence. That leads to simple grammar, doesn't it? And also thinking about how language can be flexible and how phrasing things differently can completely change what a sentence means. So what the children are doing now is they're not just retrieving chunks of language, they're actually generating it for the first time. And so that's a really big thing. The question that always comes up from practitioners is how do I know when this is starting to happen? What do I look out for? So what you're going to see is these longer gestalts are going to get fewer and fewer. And what they're going to be replaced with is more short but original phrases. You're probably going to hear combinations that you haven't heard before and a lot more of that sort of spontaneous language. You will also see grammars emerging, but it's not accurate. And I think that's a really big clue for stage one. So you might have errors across different things. So you might have verb tense errors, pronouns. They might get their sort of me, you, he, she's muddled up, plural endings. So again, you're going to hear things like me did it, him runned, to dog, it comed out, it big one, you me do it. And then I learned a new word when I was putting this webinar together. And I'll be honest with you, it's a word I probably should have known already because when I read the definition, I was like, oh yeah, well I know what that is. I've talked about that for years, but I didn't know the term for it. But it is a term called mazing. And what you might see in stage four is a lot of mazing. Now, mazing, you may have heard me talk about on previous webinars. So this is like a disfluency. So it sounds like a stammer, but it's not a stammer. It's a linguistic disfluency. So children are pausing and thinking about sort of the word order, the construction, the vocabulary. They're essentially putting it all together. And children are very clever. They kind of know that we're very busy and we're going to run off and do something else, or even worse, finish the sentence for them, if they don't kind of keep on talking. So what you end up, the examples that Ali Batty uses in her book are things like I'm gonna put that in there. He's not, she's not dancing now. They're okay, they're making peanut butter sandwiches. And you've all heard these kinds of pauses before. So is this the same linguistic disfluency that we see with children who are learning language traditionally? Is this the same stuff that you've been seeing in your setting for years and years and years? Yes. And the reason it feels so similar is because your Gestalt language processors are using language analytically for the first time. This is the first time where Gestalt language learners and analytic language learners kind of dovetail. Okay. And this is where you're going to start to see a similar pattern of progression through to spontaneous spoken language. This is where you would start to go, okay, so they're starting to sound a little bit more like their peers when the planets are aligning and everything's regulated and everything's calm and they're in a situation where they feel they can play with language. That is when you're going to see those similarities really come out. So yes, it's exactly the same linguistic disfluency that we see in all of our traditional or analytic language learners. Another wordy slide, which I've shamelessly taken from the Alison Batty book, because I tried to summarize it, I tried to rewrite it, and I just can't do it as well as she does. So at stage four, it's really important when we're working with a child that we don't correct early experiments with grammar. And here's why. So the child's grammar has undergone a huge shift in stage three. They have become referential, which means that they have started to realise that units mean things. Now they are, for the first time, actively building a phrase or a sentence word by word, and this takes tremendous processing effort. We want to acknowledge this effort by listening. We don't then correct their mistakes. They will have time to iron out their errors. When we appreciate the scale of work the child is undertaking, we realise that the child already has more than enough to do without us adding suggestions for improvement. We are here to partner in this process, not to lead the child or direct the child. And I think that's really important. And that is perhaps where your approach with your Gestalt language processors would be different to your analytic or language processors. So with your traditional or analytic language learners, yes, you might model back and correct their early experiments with grammar. but we're not going to do that with our stage 4 GLPs. Alison Batty goes on to say, but we can help them out if we see that they're struggling. So there will be times when the child is struggling to convey the ideas that they've had in their head into grammatical language. If we see they're struggling and if it feels natural for us to supply the phrase or sentence that they're searching for, we might cautiously offer this to them. So if you can see them kind of searching through their kind of mental word bank to kind of put something together, and you can see that it just won't formulate, and you feel pretty sure that that's what they're telling you, by all means sort of help them out and give them what they need, but we're not correcting errors. Okay, so thinking about stages 5 and 6 then. So stages 5 and 6 are where grammar becomes more complex. So what do we mean by grammar becoming more complex, and why is that important? So again, Ali Batty uses this example, which again is glorious. So if we compare the sentence when we start with I want to do it, then we move to I want to do it myself. I will go to the party. I may go to the party, but I'm not sure yet. Although I think I'd like to go to the party, I'm not sure that I have the energy. And if I go and I don't like it, how do I get home? So you can see that by making the grammar and vocabulary more complex, that is allowing us to express, more complex and subtle ideas. They all do the job, but to what degree? So we know, don't we, that the more information that we give, the more we're going to be understood by our communication partner. And more complex grammar and vocabulary do just that. So that's why it's important to go through stages 5 and 6 so that we can refine our message. So, how does grammar become more complex? Don't panic on this slide. I've made it as easy as I can. All right. So your stage 4 child may give you the basic pronouns such as I, me, mine, you, your, yours, we, our, ours, they, their, theirs, them, he, him, his, she, her, hers, it, this, that. Okay. They are your kind of core pronouns. And you can see then as they move into stage 5, you get the more complex ones like no one or nobody. And then in stage 6, we get those sort of anyone, anybody, everybody, everyone. So you can see, can't you, that they become more and more specific as we head through the stages. In terms of verbs, so our doing words, we have at stage 4 those real basic verb constructions. So I walk, I am walking, we ate, we danced, I'm going to play. There might be some auxiliary verbs, so we could or I did. As we head into stage 5, we have a lot more play in terms of tenses. And those auxiliary verbs widen out. So instead of we could or I did, we might have I can, I will, I may, I could, I should, I would. So you have a lot more meaning carried in those. And then in stage 6, that gets better again in terms of things like I must come, I shall go. So you can see how they're getting really, really specific and really, really complex. You also see in stage 6 verbs functioning as nouns. So to bounce becomes like bouncing is fun. So bouncing now becomes the noun, it becomes a thing. Or I love reading. Okay. Going back to stage 4, we might get early negatives such as not, or early questions such as who, what, where, how many, and how much. Going into stage 5, again, you're getting those conjunctions. So, but, so that, or, I would do that, but I don't want to. Um, I gave him a cuddle so that he would feel better, that kind of thing. And then you can see that actually we have in stage six your kind of subordinate clauses. So where, when, how, until. So I can't do this until I've done my homework. Um, I will go when I've had a shower, unless I, yeah, I can't go out unless I've tidied my bedroom. Okay, so you can see that the grammar is getting more and more and more complex as we go through those stages. Okay, so it's quite theory heavy, this webinar, but I hope it shows you an example of what we mean by more simple grammar and the stages that we pass through to get to that super complex grammar. So, as practitioners and people working with these children, how can we support? Because I think if you haven't got a linguistics degree or a speech and language therapy degree, and you look at that slide, you might go, crikey, goodness me, how am I going to support that? How am I going to learn about auxiliary verbs or subordinate clauses? You don't have to. Don't worry. The goal is still to talk completely naturally to these children for about, 50% of the time mindfully modeling and the other 50% of the time just talking really normally. By now, these children might have real highly specific interests. You may see unusual fixations on things. You may not, but you might. So I assessed a 5-year-old the other day who is interested in hand dryers and was just quoting makes and models of all sorts of hand dryers. So hand dryers were completely his thing. And so instead of pulling away from it, I leaned into it. We talked about things like putting our hands in the hand dryer or under the hand dryer, you know, because it's meaningful to him. And that's what we need to do. If your child has really specific interests, lean in and be led by them. If they're a child who does like pretend play, that's fantastic for pronouns. So, what is he doing? What is she doing? Where are they going? Verbs, again, talking about all the things that they're up to, and questions. So, if your child is into pretend play, really use it because it can be very, very helpful. Crafting and building are really good as well. We can predict what's going to happen. We can think about what we're going to do. Lots of problem solving, talking about ideas. Oh, I wonder if I put this pom-pom on here, will it look like a nose? All of those questions about hypothesizing and then seeing what happens. Books continue to be brilliant, as always. So the You Choose books are really good in terms of imagination. And there's I think there's one about sort of space and fairy tales. So they again can lean into some special interests. And all books that have, fewer words or that lean into those special interests can be really, really good. Being outside is amazing as well. So exploring and problem solving. So I want to get that leaf, but I can't reach it. What could I do? What could I stand on? Could I jump high enough? Outdoors is brilliant for that kind of thing. So once we're into stage 5 and 6, we can model correct grammar back. Monitor your child's reaction though, because there's a big chance that you may have actually missed the intended meaning if the grammar isn't quite there yet. So do really think about all of the potential meanings that that sentence could hold, because the one you land on might not be the right one. Also, really, really look for if a child who is quite comfortably sitting in stage 4, 5, or 6 starts using stage 1 or 2 gestalts again. So that is a really big communication of dysregulation and all is not well. Okay, so you must at that point start to troubleshoot and regulate because they are going back to something that is familiar and makes them feel safe and regulates them. And they're also, you can infer sort of feeling stress or dysregulation that means that they can't yet access these new stages because they're not yet robust enough to work through stress and dysregulation. So if you see that kind of regression to stage 1 and 2, think about what could be going wrong for the child. I'm really sorry it was so wordy tonight. There was a lot of theory, there was a lot going on, and there's also heaps more that I haven't touched on. So, taking language samples and something called developmental sentence types and scoring. What about those children who use AAC, so who use like iPads or chatterboards, but we also know that they are a GLP? Don't worry. If you need to dive deeper with a child like that, which is unlikely, you should have a speech and language therapist on board with you. But it is touched on in Ali Bhatti's book. So if you want to have a look there, you can. But you probably won't need to. As ever, if you want to find out more, please go and check out these wonderful professionals. So Mrs. Speechy P is an autistic and ADHD diagnosed speech therapist in America. Speech Student Sensory SLP got married a couple of weeks ago. They are both amazing. So Sensory SLP, Jessie, she works with small autistic people, and Speech Dude works with teenage autistic people. So between them, they know everything. Neurowild is an Australian speech and language therapist who's ADHD and autistic. NeuroD EY teacher is an early years teacher, and Meaningful Speech is a lady called Alexandria, and she does all of the postgraduate training in GLP. So she is like the new guru. Join us. That is the last webinar for this academic year. Okay, so we're not having a replay this month because everyone's going to go away on holiday. But over the summer holidays, the Stronger Practice Hubs are across the country are all hosting one webinar. Our webinar is on Wednesday, August the 12th, and we're kind of doing a speech and language showcase. So speech, language and communication, we're thinking about norms, considerations for additional support, language rich settings, and whatever else I decide to throw in the hour that we've got. So please, if you are around, come and support the hub on the national virtual stage. It's very, very exciting. I wonder how many people we'll have. So that's the end of the teaching portion. And Damon, if you could just stop recording.